Again, hello everyone. My name is Gracie. I'm your host, and welcome to today's Tech Talk. So, have you ever wondered if there's a career that blends coding with teaching, writing, and community building? That's the world of a developer advocacy, a role that connects tech companies with the developers who uses their products. Today, we have April Gittens, Principal Cloud Advocate at Microsoft, will share practical advice on how to position yourself for success in this people focused technical career. Whether you're just starting out or thinking about pivoting, you'll walk away with a clearer understanding what the developer advocacy is and whether it is the right fit for you. Make sure you have your questions ready, everyone, and do drop them in the chat. Now, without further ado, let's welcome April.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you all. One moment here. All right. Can you confirm that you're able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. I see thumbs up. Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name, as mentioned, is April Gittens, and thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to be joining you all today because I'm here to speak with you about a career that I've been doing now that I've been at Microsoft for 7 years. I've been doing it for the past 6 years since I've been here, and that's the role of a developer advocate. So a little about myself. I did not get started in tech. I'm actually 100% self-taught programmer. I used to work in the luxury fashion industry. I was a menswear stylist and a visual merchandiser. And then I eventually decided to pivot into tech. I started as a project manager. And then in the midst of doing some project management, I decided that I think I wanted to do that data science. And so I figured, well, I need to learn a programming language to do that. And I settled on Python. That seemed to have been the language. That was the choice of data scientists. And while learning, I decided I don't like data science, but I had this Python skill that I had learned, and I wanted to continue to strengthen that. That's when I found AI assistants and chatbots. And this was pre-generative AI that we're seeing today. I'm talking about 2000, or not 2000, oh gosh, I'm dating myself. 2017, 2018 was when I decided to do more with Python. But I have this thing where when I learn something new, the best way for me to retain it is to teach it. So I started creating YouTube content. I was doing very beginner intro level videos, teaching things like Git and how to use a command line, and then very basic Python stuff. And then one day I went to an event and I had met this guy who had asked me, do I get paid for what I do? And I'm like, no, what do you mean, do I get paid for what I do? I do it because this is how I retain knowledge. This is how I help others learn as well. But he opened my eyes to the fact that this is actually a career field. And what I was doing was known as developer advocacy, or at least a piece of developer advocacy. And that opened up an entire world of what was possible, and also what's brought me here to you all today. So throughout this session, I'll share with you more about my own journey, as well as the things that I'm working on today and what's helped me over the years become a developer advocate. And I'll also dive into some of the ways we do developer advocacy at Microsoft, which is where I currently work. So as I mentioned, I've been at Microsoft now for 7 years. I actually just celebrated 7 years on the 25th, so a couple days ago. And coming to do developer advocacy was nothing like I had expected to get into. It wasn't that I had planned since I was little to be a developer advocate. It just sort of happened. But today, I lead our Python team. So I am also a manager at Microsoft as well. And I lead a team of very, very great, very deeply technical individuals as well. And so I'm very grateful to work with them. Now, when it comes to developer advocacy as a whole, as we think about it as a profession, we are the summation of various roles. It's not just one single thing that we do. But the end goal is to improve the developer experience. And so we do connect the engineering teams with the developer community, whereas the engineering teams, they're the ones who are actually working on the products and services and tools. But once they've done their part, we got to make sure that we can go find users to actually use those products, services, and tools. And so that's where someone like myself comes in, and we make sure that we amplify what's available to the community. But beyond just amplifying, we also bring that feedback back to the engineering team. So we're kind of that middle person in that sense where we're able to connect the two together. And so in addition to that, we are all responsible for making sure that we craft the right story of how these products, services, and tools fit into the developer's life and in their workflows that they already have going on. And so you could think of us as being storytellers, but with technical backgrounds. Because while it's great to be able to craft a story, you also have to have the technical depth to be able to communicate in a way that's going to come across as relevant and technically accurate, and that it makes sense for whoever the respective audience is. And it's not always that we engage with individuals who are deeply technical. We engage with developers at all skill sets, no matter where you are in your learning journey, whether you're just getting started or whether you've been programming for 20-something years. We are there to help ensure that you have success in using the products and services and tools that we have. And that goes beyond just what we do at Microsoft. That also applies to other companies as well, who also have developer advocacy as a role. And so in addition to that, I will say almost every developer advocate I've ever met, actually, I would probably generalize and say all developer advocates I've ever met, we care very, very deeply about our respective technical communities. More often you will hear that if we weren't getting paid to do our jobs, would we still hang out in the dev communities and help out? And absolutely we would, because that's how much we like spending time in the community. So keep that in mind as I go through what it's like in reality being developer advocate. And then also, if any of this sounds like you, then hey, this might be the next step for you in your own career journey. So I did talk a little bit about what developer advocacy is, but if we look at things just a little deeper in terms of exactly what is it that we do, I mentioned how we're that bridge. So we're considered to be the voice of the developer. And the way you can think about that is it's not too often that that external customers have direct access to our product team and our engineering team. And that's where we come in, because let's say you are trying out an API that we have and you're starting to hit some errors and you're not sure what's going on. It was just working 2 days ago, but now it's not working, and there's nothing in the change log or release notes to indicate that something has changed. Well, that's where typically someone like myself would come in, and you'd likely engage with us, let us know what's going on. And we more oftentimes have a direct link to the individual or teams that can take action on fixing that. So we're there to provide that voice of the developer back internally to our own teams. And it goes beyond just finding issues and bugs. Maybe you have a new idea for something, a new feature that you think would really improve the developer experience. And so we're there to collect that and also bring that back. On the flip side, not everything always starts externally. Sometimes we're in conversations internally with the product managers or the engineering team, and they may have an idea for something that they're thinking through on how to modify a product. And if we know that in reality, it might not be in the best interest for developers such as yourself, that's where we're able to come in and express that as well. So we are really advocating on your behalf. We're not just here to push products and say, try our new shiny thing. We're here to make sure that you have a really great experience. And so, as mentioned, we are that bridge to the product as well. And so, we are there to help influence the roadmap. And so, for those unfamiliar, the roadmap is essentially the plan of the features that are to come or the improvements that are to come for any given product, service, or tool. And so, typically, teams will have these planned out sometimes months in advance. A product team may know everything they're adding to a product from now until the end of the year, or it might be shorter. They may know everything they want to add between now and the end of the month, for example. But we as advocates are able to come in and provide our opinion on that to help influence that roadmap, because maybe there's something that's really trending in the community that we think would be really great for the product, but maybe the PMs aren't too privy to it, or the engineering team isn't aware, or maybe they have other priorities, but we think that this one thing will really make a huge impact. That's where we're able to come in and influence that product roadmap to get that added to it as well. And so the final thing here is to be a builder and an educator. So beyond just speaking with community, we also create. And we create sample code, we contribute as well to open source projects, we create various forms of learning, whether it's going to be blog posts, tutorials, we'll do workshops. We create all these forms of content to help developers such as yourself learn how to use our product, services, and tools. So there are a lot of hats, I would say, that we wear as developer advocates. And although every company will do developer advocacy different, there is a good amount of overlap, I would say, in terms of what you'll find similar going from one company to the next. You'll also find developer advocates at more than just big tech companies. So big tech is what I think of like a Microsoft or a Google or AWS. We also have startups who also have developer advocacy roles as well. Their teams may not be the same size as you would find at a big tech company, but they are just as valuable. And so if you are considering looking for roles in developer advocacy, I 100% encourage you, don't only look at the big tech companies, you can also check out startups, especially in this AI era, because a lot of these AI startups who are creating different developer tools, they want to have developers using their tools. And so they start to turn to developer advocates to actually set up developer advocacy programs within the company so they can go out and find developers to adopt their own whatever it is they're building. So don't just pigeonhole yourself into looking for only certain types of companies. I would say expand your search to really anyone who's hiring developer advocates. It's going to be rewarding either way. So there's 3 pillars that we focus on as developer advocates. And I feel that anytime I meet with a product team internally at Microsoft, I'm always mentioning these. It's going to be community, code, and content. And so when it comes to community, I spent a lot in the beginning talking about how we engage with the developer community a lot, or our respective communities. And I say that because, well, we spend a lot of time in the community. Now, not every developer advocacy role requires that you work on site, for example. So for me, I've only ever worked remote since I've been at Microsoft for these past 7 years. And so the benefit of that is I do have that flexibility to go participate in in-person meetups and things of that nature. Some companies, they will require on-site. I know right now we're seeing more companies who are migrating back to on-site, and that's fine as well. It gives you an opportunity to collaborate with your team. But what I want to point out, though, in general, is that in developer advocacy, a good amount of your time is going to be spent in the community, whether that's in person or if it's going to be online, because community doesn't only meet in person. They also meet in different online places, and it can vary depending on the respective tech community. You may find that most people hang out on Reddit, for example, or we have some communities that are really more so Discord server focused, and that's where they hang out. And then sometimes you'll find most folks hanging out on social media platforms like X, for example, or Mastodon, or Blue Sky, or Instagram, or Threads. The whole point, though, is that when it comes to being a developer advocate, we go where the community is. So when it comes to actually being engaged in the community, you'll often find us part of that community and within that community. We don't just want to pop in just to like let people know we have a new thing and leave. We want to become part of the community and actually grow relationships. When it comes to content, there's various mediums in which we create content. And I think it's important to understand this because there's not one way to create content as a developer advocate. Content creation is going to boil down to what the community gravitates towards. So I'm just going to use an example that might not be real, but let's just say the Python community hates reading blogs, which they don't. It's a lot of Python devs who write blogs, but let's just say they hate reading blogs. Well, it's important that you spend enough time in the community to know that, because when it's time to create content, we don't want to create a bunch of blogs if we know the community is not going to read it. So you want to make sure that as you're doing your content creation, that you're doing it in a medium that makes most sense for that respective community. Content can come across various forms, whether that's going to be blog posts, tutorials, workshops, live streams, podcasts. It could be just doing actual talks at events, for example. And so deciding on which type of content it is that you want to produce, not only does it matter what the community is into, but also what your skill set consists of as well. So it's a perfect example. All video production that lives on the internet that I do for my employer, 9 times out of 10, I did everything. I did all the scripting, I did all the recording, I did all the editing as well, and I just hand it to whoever publishes it, wherever it goes. But that's not the case across the board. Sometimes we have some folks who actually have production teams that will do the recording for you. They'll do the editing as well. But if you do have the skill set to do it on your own, I will definitely say it's a very valuable skill set to have. I didn't wake up with that skill set. It came from years of trial and error. YouTube is like my best recommendation for learning how to do things like video content, for example. I actually watch a lot of influencers talk about it, and not necessarily tech influencers, but just influencers in general, because a lot of the techniques that they use, it actually translates very well when it comes to doing technical content. So if it comes to growing your skills around these pillars, especially for content, I would say start looking at resources that are available online, practice as well. That goes for writing blog posts too, also creating workshops, hosting workshops, actually delivering them in person. You'll want to get your practice in, because as a developer advocate, that's something that you'll find yourself doing often. And then there's code. So the code part is exactly as it sounds. We do code as advocates. And the amount that you actually code is honestly going to depend on the scope of your role. So in a typical week, do I code every day? Not necessarily. If I'm in the middle of preparing for an event, or I know I need a demo for something, well, yeah, I'll be doing a lot of coding then. So it definitely fluctuates. What I think is beautiful, though, about advocacy as a career field when it comes to doing things like code is that there's always something new to learn. And so you might start out really, really like knowledgeable in a certain like language, for example, but then the industry changes, things shift, and now you need to learn another language. And that's what happened to me. Even though I first learned Python and that was like my bread and butter, when I came into developer advocacy, I did absolutely zero Python in the beginning. The reason being was my first role in advocacy was actually in our spatial computing team. And our spatial computing team was focused on extended reality. So that's everything under the umbrella of virtual reality, augmented reality, and virtual reality. We didn't build experiences with Python. We built experiences with C#. And so I had to quickly learn C# to be good at my job, to be able to do my job. And then I was introduced to Babylon JS. And what did that mean? Well, now I needed to learn JavaScript and TypeScript as well. So while you may have knowledge in one programming language, I would say prepare yourself mentally to eventually have to probably learn another language depending on how your career shifts and evolves. I'm only now finally getting to a place where I actually do Python, the first language I learned in my actual full-time job in developer advocacy. So that flexibility is really helpful. But the coding part, though, it definitely does happen. You will get a chance to do it. Sometimes you're not just creating samples. Sometimes you're actually creating tools that we use internally, or sometimes you're creating tools for the community. Instead, we have some advocates in our org who's created and maintained what's called Awesome Copilot. And it's been a really nice contribution of GitHub Copilot prompts that you can use and smaller samples as well. So that's something that's community focused, but it's not something that's derived from the product team. It came from our organization. And so as you can see, these three pillars, they all blend into each other, or they all, I say blend into each other in some way, shape, or form. And so you'll typically will usually see these core pillars anytime someone is talking about the work that they do as developer advocates. All right, so a day in the life. All right. Fair warning, this is not a everyday thing. This is what a day could look like. And then I'll actually get into what my true day-to-day has been for this week. So usually, sometimes, as a developer advocate, you'll wake up when it's time to start your day. You might begin by looking at what's happening in the community. What were the last things that people said in the Discord server? And from whatever was discussed, are there any questions you can answer? So you'll come in, you'll answer those questions. Oh, someone had an issue with something, so you'll log that in whatever bug tracking that the product team is using. And then from there, if there's anything that you need to review, you might review that. And that could be your entire morning. Then we get to about the midday time. And by midday, you're probably preparing for a talk that's coming up, or you're putting together some sort of tutorial that you need to record for a YouTube channel. And you might be updating documentation as well. You're submitting PRs for that. Or maybe one of the docs writers came to you and said, hey, I want to publish this. Could you take a look and let me know if everything comes across clear? So you're reviewing that. You're giving your feedback. And then by the afternoon, well, you might be doing a live stream. Like myself, I'm in the afternoon and I'm doing a live stream. And that live stream may be something that you're hosting where you're taking questions from the audience, but you're also showing them how to do something technical. You might be hosting office hours in a Discord server where folks are able to come in and ask questions and you can turn around and answer. And you might be participating in actual product meetings with the product team. Maybe they have a new strategy that they want to review and they've asked for whichever advocates are available if they could come in and help out. And so now you're sitting in those meetings and you're able to provide that developer voice that I mentioned earlier. Then by the evening, things are winding down. You're hanging out on whatever social media platform that you like to go to and speak with other developers. Maybe you sit on, I don't know, Blue Sky for an hour or X for an hour. You sit on Reddit for an hour, just reading what people are talking about. But you're also bringing that insight back internally as well. So that way we all know what's going on. And maybe there's something that we need to do in terms of product to modify what the community is talking about. Or maybe you came across some really not friendly posts about your products. And so you want to bring that back internally as well. So we can do whatever we need to do to hopefully turn that situation around. And that takes you to your whole day, honestly. But this is just an example of what a day could look like as a developer advocate. Not every day is going to look like this. For example, yesterday, I literally spent all day, and I brought it here for you all to take a look at, making this robot dog. This was my whole day yesterday, was building this 120-part robot dog. And why was I spending my whole day doing that? Well, I need to create content. So sometimes you find yourselves doing what looks to be like silly things like that all day, but the outcome is what's going to be important, because just from this robot dog alone, I literally have content for the rest of the year that I can create for work. And that's super helpful. Now, what kind of content? Well, I'll key you all in. I'm working on content for GitHub Copilot. And since I do work with the folks at GitHub, I'm showing how you can use Copilot to help program the dog. So that could be what, your day looks like. That's what my day was like yesterday. And actually, when I'm done here today, I'll be filming some videos for it. Some days you could go to an event. You might have to travel. We do travel. You don't have to travel. I'm actually one of those people that don't like traveling too often, but you can travel in this role. And so you may find yourself in another country delivering talks and actually speaking on site with other customers. And then some days can be really tough. I definitely won't say it's always just 100% fun all the time. Sometimes you may be in the midst of creating a sample for a really important demo and nothing's working. And the best you can do is try to find the right people to help you out, to unblock you. And maybe you have to pivot partway through and think about a whole new way to approach it. So every day looks different, I would say. And if you were to ask any other developer advocate from any other company, or even the ones that I work with, they'll probably tell you, yeah, my day is a mixture of things and it definitely fluctuates. Also, I did want to say, if you do have questions, make sure that you're putting them in the chat. I'm going to get to them when we get to the end for sure. All right. In terms of skills, so hopefully by now you've heard me say some things where you're thinking, oh, maybe this might be something that you're interested in, but like, what really does it take to be successful? So I've narrowed things down to 4 different skills for success in this field. And it's a combination of both hard skills and not hard skills, well, soft skills and technical skills as well. So communication. This is a role that requires a lot of communication. It's not too often you'll find someone that's a developer advocate that does not engage with the public in some way, shape, or form. If they are a developer advocate and they're not engaging directly with the public, it's more likely that they're doing some sort of program or project management sort of scope for a certain period of time, but it's not a forever thing. 9 times out of 10, you're engaging publicly. So you'll want to strengthen your communication skills, your public speaking skills, your writing skills as well, your ability to tell and craft stories, and your ability to explain technical concepts, either simply or be able to talk in depth about technical concepts. If you want to strengthen this skill, what I actually really love, and I've been doing it a lot more lately, despite having spoken for years, I go right to YouTube. I always default to YouTube as my go-to resource, but that's because there's just so many things on there that can help you out in growing your skills. Find someone who has a video on public speaking, or how to be persuasive, or how to speak more confidently, or how to craft stories, because that's what's going to help you. But most important is that you practice. Because you can consume all the content you want on how to do things, but you have to also go practice it. Practice it with someone you trust. Practice it in front of a group. Go to a meetup and volunteer to do a session on something. Write a couple of blog posts for your own blog. You have to strengthen that muscle to start to get good at it. Then we have empathy. So this is the ability to understand the pain points of the developers, because what might seem tiny or probably insignificant to you could mean a big deal to another developer. Perfect example. I had a student that reached out to me who was working on a final project, and he wanted to incorporate our evaluation SDK, but he was having some trouble. He wasn't sure what was going on, why things weren't working, but he was definitely stressed out about it. And so I took a look at the situation. I said, send me everything you got. I'll take a look at everything. And after looking through what he had going on, what probably took him a couple hours to get through took me 10 minutes to resolve. But not only did I just resolve the problem for him, because I want to make sure he was set up for success moving forward, I also took the time to explain what was going on and to also identify where there was a mistake that he had made, but also how to resolve it as well. And so I find myself in these moments often where I may need to hop on a call with someone who reaches out on LinkedIn because they're trying to figure out something and they can't understand like why it's not working. Or maybe someone was about to go present to a customer on Monday and they went to go check something 2 hours beforehand and they realized the API changed or something, and now they're like freaking out because they need somebody to help. You have to have this empathy, I would say, for developers to want to help. This is a very helpful role, I would say. Technical depth goes without saying. It's very challenging to be a developer advocate if you're not technical. I will say what technical means will vary because you may find yourself brand new to a technology area and you may be just at the beginner level. But guess what? That actually has value in our world as well, especially right now in this whole AI world that we're in, because a lot of what we are doing as developer advocates in the AI space, we're learning as the community is also learning as well. And so what's important though is that you're able to learn quickly and adapt, and then to be able to turn that around and share that with community and help others as well. But technical depth is very, very important. If there's a certain technical area that you're really into, I would say right now, start going deeper if that's an area that you want to work in as a developer advocate, because there definitely will be a lot of value in that. And then community craft. So because we do a lot of community things, such as doing events, for example, you want to have some experience with hosting events, executing events, planning events. Not everyone does a ton of that, I would say, but it's really helpful to have that skill set because sometimes you might be pulled into a smaller team that's putting together an event and they need help. And that's where you can come and shine and show others how you're able to help out in that space. So if you want to start learning how to do that a bit more as well, you can honestly start small. Just start up an online meetup, for example, for a community that you might already be part of, and provide a little bit of structure to it. For example, work on marketing that event to others and like sending out invites, work on the moderation side of when we have community conversations, because all of that is what we do in our role. Now, measuring impact, because we don't just live on vibes in developer advocacy. We do get measured on the output that we put out into the world, but the way that measurement happens is going to vary by company. So Microsoft specifically, we focus on impact. So what impact did the activity you did have? And impact isn't always just dollars. It varies, to be honest with you. Sometimes it could be things like how many people have we onboarded? How many people have forked or starred the GitHub repository where we have a code sample, for example? And also, what feedback are we getting as well? Did you host a workshop and you got a lot of good, valuable, actionable feedback? That's how we look at impact when it comes to figuring out, are we doing well as developer advocates? And so even here in the example that I have, we can look at growth, for example, for signups. And this example, like 1,200 was for January, but by February we had 1,800, and then March we had 2,400, and we see that growth. But it's not always like that. Sometimes we have dips as well. But to have that analytical eye to explain why the numbers do what they do is also going to be a very key, valuable skill as well. We typically do have folks who more so handle the whole number side, I would say, but being able to look at data that's being pulled in and infer things and be able to recommend what we do going forward is also a very valuable skill to have as well. Now, with that said, we do have our own challenges and misconceptions when it comes to being a developer advocate. And so as much fun as we have, we definitely have some things that we know can be challenges, or people may see it as issues in our career field. First and foremost, we get confused for being marketing, and we are not marketing. And sometimes we get confused for being sales, and we don't sell. We don't have sales related goals. At least at Microsoft, our developer advocates do not have sales goals because the sales team has sales goals. And we don't work in a marketing capacity because marketing is more focused on promoting a product or a service or a tool. But developer relations, we don't just only promote the products and services as a tool we have. I mentioned before, we also have that element of advocating for the customers as well and bringing that feedback back over into our product teams as well. And so funny enough, sometimes we'll sit in conversations with marketing and they want to have someone from developer advocacy come to provide a non-marketing eye to something and make sure something doesn't land as marketing speak. And that'll happen as well. And so in general, we're not marketing, but we do help drive adoption. And then hard to quantify. So even though I showed you a very beautiful chart on the last slide, an ongoing discussion that will probably see no end in the developer advocacy space is how do we actually quantify the work that we do and the impact that it's having? And every company does it different. It really just depends on what's of priority for the company. There's things like vanity metrics, things like views of YouTube channels, for example, but we try to go a little beyond that as best as we can. And so beyond saying, well, we had 700 people tune in to the live stream, but did they convert? Did they click the call to action link that we gave them? And in clicking that link, did they sign up for Azure, for example? That's how we get beyond the vanity metrics to something that is a little bit more meaningful. And then resource constraints. I think everywhere has resource constraints, but especially in this space, budget can be a resource constraint. We've had periods where we just don't have the money to travel, so then we adapt to that. But also finding that balance between staying up to date with what's happening from a technical perspective and also staying in touch with the community. If you lean too hard in one direction, you lose the ability to be engaged in the other. So if I spend way too much time in the community, but not enough time keeping my skills up to date with what's the latest, I'm not going to do the community a really good job of helping out because I'm behind. Well, on the flip side, if I spend too much time just focused and narrowing in on just getting smarter, if you will, but I'm not spending enough time in the community, well, I'm not there to know what the community is talking about, what they're buzzing about, what they hate all of a sudden. Like, you have to know those things as well. So finding that really good balance is going to be super helpful. And then there's compensation and growth. I love talking about money because at the end of the day, we don't all get by on looks and smiles. We definitely need to make sure that we also have sufficient income to sustain us and our lifestyles. Compensation package is going to vary by company. I did pull the current average salary from Glassdoor, developer advocate roles. And I would say, keeping in mind, it does vary by location as well, your experience and the company. Could start on the low end, roughly 111K, and then it can actually go beyond this 190K that I have on here. I can speak on behalf of Microsoft, for example, even myself. It's very well possible to go beyond 200K, some folks beyond 250K as developer advocates. So that's something to consider. I know sometimes when folks are learning how to code and they really got their eye on that software engineering role because the compensation looks lovely, but there's also other roles you can take that might be different, still technical, and you might even enjoy them more. You never know. Then there's also stock. So you get more than just your base salary. There's stock options available as well. And if you, at Microsoft, for example, demonstrate a lot of good impact, your stock increases, and that's more money that becomes available once it vests. So when it vests, that's when it becomes available to you. And then there's external opportunities as well. So that's doing things like creating content for platforms like Pluralsight, for example, and getting paid for it. Or maybe you're doing a collaboration with a brand where you're doing something like a technical review, but you want to make sure that you're being mindful of the moonlighting policy for your job. The moonlighting policy is essentially going to tell you what sort of work you can be compensated for outside of your working hours. And so you don't want to go against that moonlighting policy because that can come back on you in a very bad way. But in this role, there's various ways to increase your income, and I'll leave it with that. And so in terms of a pathway to DevRel, you don't need a computer science degree. As I mentioned, I had no technical background coming into this space. The four things that I would say is really going to make a really big difference: technical mastery. Whether you do a boot camp, whether you do self-study like I did, you want to grow that technical bone of yours for whatever area that you're interested in. Communication and education as well. So that public speaking that I mentioned, go do Toastmasters, for example, where you can get more comfortable with public speaking, write some blogs and tutorials. And then community engagement, spend time in the community, join some Discord servers, hang out on Reddit, go to meetups, become a familiar face in the community, because that's going to be really important in a lot of what you're doing in your role when you become a developer advocate. And then showcase your work. Don't just keep it to yourself, put it on like a website. If you're working with a company doing some freelance tutorials, I used to do that with Twilio before I came to Microsoft, put it on there and make sure you can link back to it. When I had my interview at Microsoft, everyone that interviewed me had already seen my content before I even knew who they were, for example. So put your things out there. It will definitely be helpful for you. And then in terms of career growth, where can things lead? So you can grow into leadership. That's the path that I took. I became a manager, and I've managed one team. I've managed multiple teams since I've been in this space. But you do get to start driving strategy a bit more, and I really like that part. But you don't have to be a manager. You can just become a super duper high level developer advocate as well. And the compensation is just as good. You could also transition out of advocacy and go work in product. And you can be like a product manager, for example, for a product. You can become a community manager. I have known folks who have migrated and went both directions. Also, you can land in engineering roles as well, whereas you're not creating the content, you're actually creating the product itself. You're contributing to the product. So there's different places you can go from advocacy into other areas of tech. And you can also do your own thing as well. And so companies as a whole, they need developer advocates. Adoption increases, which is lovely. And then in addition to that, we are able to help find that product market fit. We can find actual real use cases that are going to be relevant and make sure that that shines in whatever narrative we have around a product. And then also the community aspect of it all. We want to make sure that we're able to identify individuals who can also amplify and are excited about the products that we have to share. And then just going to leave you with a quick little example of something that I went through just before we head into Q&A here. But when it comes to just like doing event preparation, I'll take you through what it looked like for me for our Microsoft AI tour that we have currently going on. I'm responsible for one of the sessions, and when I received the brief of what was needed, I was told 45-minute session. It needs to include these like 2 products for sure. And here's a little bit of a summary of the fictitious scenario that you could use, but we're not giving you too much information on that. You have to figure out the whole story yourself. And that was all I was given. So from there, what I was able to do is start finding a scenario that made sense. And I knew I had to show off our models that we had available, and also our AI toolkit extension, and then some of the Microsoft Foundry things. So I came up with a scenario that was relatable. We have this fictitious customer who needed help choosing paint, but the company itself, they needed a way to provide that service to customers without fully always having someone readily available, so that way the customer could be unblocked and move forward with their purchases. But on the customer side, they're strapped for time. Everybody's busy. And so I focused the whole talk around the perspective of the developer that's responsible for developing an app to help customers that would get stuck with trying to find the right product for whatever it is they're trying to do. And that's how I did the entire story around it. And I found ways to weave in products that felt natural rather than overloading with every single product that we have under our product umbrella. And so in this role, that's what it looks like doing the job. We don't necessarily just only focus on one-off demos of something that looks great. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And so that's something I want you to keep in mind if you're still thinking about considering this career path. All right. So in terms of what's next, so we're going to have a Q&A, of course. But if you're wondering, again, how do you get started? Start small. You don't have to go start up a brand new venture in content creation. You could just do a tiny little demo, for example, and you can write a tutorial around it, or just do like a YouTube video around it as well, and continue to practice on doing that. But if it solves a pain point, you're on the right path. Measure and iterate. So see how well that content does and find ways to improve. Ask for feedback, because it's not a thing to more so focus on your ego. It's more to make sure that what you're doing helps other developers. And that's really important. And then also joining the community. So go to meetups, contribute to open source, as mentioned. But what's most important is that you build genuine relationships with the community as well. No one likes for people to just hop in and hop out, and they only ever see you when you're here to promote something. So become part of that community. And with that said, if you want to explore developer relations, reach out to other folks that you may find on places like LinkedIn that have developer advocate as their role. You can reach out to me and ask me questions as well. Right now, I know we will get to a point where our team is hiring. And so I would say keep an eye out for the Microsoft careers site to see if we have roles that are opening. And then also I would say, just practice, but most important, have fun. We have a lot of fun as developer advocates. And so this has probably been the most fun I've had in my career in tech, I would say, because fashion has always still been my most favorite career that I've had. But in tech, being a developer advocate, this has been the most fun that I've had. So that brings us to the Q&A with you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can appear a little bigger on screen for you all. But I'll see if I can find where the chat is. I've seen messages on here, but I got to see where, here they are. All right. Oops. Okay, one moment, my mouse wasn't scrolling. All right, so I'm starting back at the beginning.
We have a one from Jacob.
Yes, but Jacob. So Jacob says, seems like the best personality fit for developer advocate roles are 7, ENFJ, ENFP, extroverted types. Not necessarily. You'd be surprised. We do have some introverts on our teams who are definitely a little more behind the scenes, I would say. Not as every time you open up YouTube or LinkedIn, they have a video. Those individuals, they also do well as well. At least I can speak for the ones that are at Microsoft. The way that they engage with community is a little different compared to someone who's always going to be at the meetup. They tend to excel really in online places, I would say. They're able to more engage directly there, and that might be their thing. And nothing's wrong with that, to be honest with you. If it works, it works. What's important is, can you represent the community? Do you know what the community has going on and what they want? And are you contributing as well to the community? And are you helping drive the strategic decisions that the product team is making? If you're doing all those things, whether you're introvert or extrovert, either one is fine. But I'll keep reading what it says. People who truly understand client and business relations are on their way up, so to speak, within the technical leader, PM, eventual C-suite ladder. So if you do want to keep growing, I would say developing that business acumen is going to definitely be important. It's, from one thing I will say I've learned being a manager is that it's not everybody's dream to grow in that way in their career. And that was something that I had to come to learn over time, because I started off as one of those, I want to grow to the top. I want to climb that ladder. But we have some folks who are amazingly technical and they're fine staying where they are. They don't want to grow. They don't want to be a manager, and nothing's wrong with that. And so that's what I think is great when it comes to deciding what you want to do for your career, because it's really up to you and what you feel most comfortable doing. But if you do want to grow in that direction of leadership, then yes, developing that business acumen is going to be really helpful. Let me scroll down. And I think I might have answered some of what you said in the bottom half of that question. I have a small screen I'm reading off of. All right, let me see what else we have here. I think I can make this bigger. Oh, I can. Okay. Let me go back to where I had the chat. And that made me lose the chat. Let me see where. Oh, here it is. Okay, perfect. This is better. All right. So evening, Mariah says, evening implies a pretty long day. What's the work-life balance like? Mariah, that's going to depend on the developer advocate. So for me personally, I start at 9, I end at 5, and if you message me after 5, it's not going to happen. But some people love to work longer than that as well. Nothing says that they have to. We may have the occasional moments where we have an event that's coming up and we need folks able to help with preparing with whatever demos or sample code or what have you. That doesn't happen all the time, I would say. Usually that's around our larger our larger first party events that we're hosting. But some advocates, they just eat, live, breathe tech. And so they find a more challenging time really having that work-life balance. But that's also because they just really enjoy always doing what they're doing. For me, for example, though, I like spending time with my family once the workday's over. So once 5 o'clock hits, I'm shut down for the day. I go about my own business. And so it really depends on the individual. Now, there was a time where I was hanging out on what used to be called Twitter late into the evening. And then that's a very easy way to start nearing burnout, at least for me. So I super scaled it back. And again, that 5 o'clock cutoff is my 5 o'clock cutoff. Ronald, yes, even if you are introverted, I think you would enjoy it. And so Jacob, leveraging more leveraging soft skills to be successful, not bad by any means. It's just a more blended role. Absolutely. And that's one thing I wanted to point out too about growth in this role and success in this role as well. Because you can be the most technical person on the team, but it doesn't mean that you have the most impact. And one thing I've come to learn over the times is that some folks, they will have like years, more years than I have of technical experience in a subject, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the same amount of experience as being a developer advocate. Because to be able to combine what I've shared in this session for what it means to be a developer advocate, it's not this skill that you learn through technology. It really does bring in those soft skills as well, and that ability to really be engaging and to really communicate well with others and think strategically as well. Because if I was just told that I need to do a demo for GitHub Copilot, for example, like with the robot dog, for example, I need to do some demos around GitHub Copilot, and I could have just randomly filmed something and called it a day, but I want to think smarter than that. So I know if I have something much larger that I can break into multiple pieces of content, well, that does me pretty well, because now I don't have to spend the next couple of months trying to figure out, well, what am I going to record now? Because I'm out of ideas. I have something I can feed off of and keep feeding from, or eating from, I should say, to make sure I have what it is that I need. And then also, conversion issues can often benefit more from onboarding developer advocates, so teacher, presenter type, technical person, because they will always be thinking, how is the onboarding process for this technology and how can I help fix it? Yes, I will say, if you are the type that can always find something wrong with someone else's documentation, this is a role for you, because that was me. When I did my interview at Microsoft, I was not asked to prepare anything in advance. But what I did was I went to their Python documentation, because that was at the time the only language that I knew. I went to their Python documentation that they had for whatever service, and I put together like an entire dossier of everything that I would recommend to modify based on the developer experience and the user experience. And I handed that over to the PM when I sat down. And he was shocked, not in a bad way. He was shocked and, oh, wow, I didn't realize someone was going to do this. Needless to say, I got hired because this is my 7th year here. But if you're able to identify ways to improve just experience, that's actually a really valuable skill to have. Um, let's see what else. And then how do I deal with facing friction within the community? Yeah, so when it comes to friction in the community, I think what's really important is that you are true to yourself. I know just recently there was, some of you may have seen it, discussions around accepting AI contributions for open source projects, for example. And while I wasn't directly in the conversations that followed up with that internally and also externally, I do have someone on my team who did participate, and that person had very close ties to the open source community. And when it came time to actually voice how do we move forward with that from what we have available at GitHub, for example, that person was able to come in and stay true to who they are, stay true to what they know the community would prefer, and voice that, rather than just give in to saying, oh no, let's do what makes everyone happy and use AI, because that's not being authentic and it doesn't help anyone at the end of the day. So when it comes to community friction, there's one side of being true and authentic to yourself when we do come internally to have discussions on how do we handle a situation. On the other end, because this role can be very public facing, you also want to remember that at the end of the day, you're representing your employer. And what I mean by that is you are essentially becoming or known as the face of the company. Well, there's multiple faces of the company, but depending on where you're hanging out from a community perspective, you're the face of like that representation of the company. And so you will want to be mindful of the conversations you engage in publicly in terms of how you engage in those conversations, because that in itself can dig you into a very deep rabbit hole of issues, because people will view your views as the company views as well. And so that's a very delicate line, I would say, to balance. I've seen instances where folks have had voice opinions on stuff, and next thing you know, it's in some tech news article and it's that person's name and Microsoft, and then that becomes a whole thing internally. Doesn't just happen at Microsoft, happens anywhere that someone's representing a company. So while there is a certain level of being authentic when we're having these discussions internally in terms of what we do next, when it comes to externally, I would say using your discretion and discernment with respect to how you engage in that situation as well. And every situation is going to be different, so I don't have one like blanket statement of how to handle everything, but I would say just definitely using discernment. I've seen a lot happen over the years. So Jacob says, while most dev portfolios don't usually require videos of yourself, DA totally seems like a role where it behooves you to have an online presence. It's like a prereq requirement. Yes, in a sense, it is helpful depending on, and this is something that you won't necessarily know externally, unfortunately. It depends on where the company is and how they're hiring people. So we have seasons where we really want people who are deeply engaged and visible in the community. And there could be various factors that's influencing that, such as, hey, we need somebody that's like really well known in this one space and can get in and learn more from that community and share with us how we can improve our products to really increase adoption in that community. And that's where being more public facing, being more known is helpful. But then there's some instances where we have periods where it's just like, you know what? We need people who have not been, for lack of a better term, tainted by the ills of what it means to be in developer advocacy. We need people who are newer in the space, people who might not have a really big online presence that's looking to grow. And so you run into those times as well. But the unfortunate part, like I said, is externally, you don't know that. But internally, we sometimes have an idea of who we're looking for and the type of developer advocate we're looking for in that moment. So what I suggest is, with that said, never hurts to apply anywhere. If you don't have the big online following and the online presence, that's fine. I think when I came to Microsoft, this was back when I was still on Twitter, I had to have had maybe less than 1,000 followers at that time. As time grew and I became more engaged in the community, then I reached up to 25,000 followers. But that wasn't until after I had been at Microsoft for some time. So I came in as someone who didn't come from any other like big tech company. I was really engaging with the folks that would listen to me on Twitter. And while I had YouTube content, I didn't have a big sprawling YouTube channel either. So all that's to say, if you have the big following and such, that's great. Is it going to earn me more compensation? Probably not. But it's good to know that you are involved. But if you are more new, still apply. You're going to grow into the role you're in. And also, if you're at companies like a Microsoft, for example, you eventually start showing up on first party channels, and that's how people start to get to know you more as well. And that's honestly how I started growing my audience early on, was showing up on Microsoft's channels once I got hired. So whatever end of the spectrum you're on, regardless, I would say apply to the roles. And then it's just a good non-AI replaceable path. So I will definitely say, with respect to just any role in the tech space in general, there's some elements in which AI is able to be leveraged to do the role. What makes developer advocacy just a bit special, I would say, is that people push back when it's very obvious that AI is doing all the work. And so with that said, while we may use AI to help with drafting things or helping with creating some code samples, for example, we're not at a place where the general public prefers AI to deliver the content. And that's where having humans come in. And when it comes to being developer advocates, while the developer community comes and consumes our content because it's helpful, there's also the human aspect to it. People have their favorite people they go to learn how to do X, Y, Z in any space you could think of, but especially here in tech, there's different personalities at play. And while there's different tools available that you could use to create like virtual avatars of people and such, I will say from any experiment I've seen done in that manner, it is not well received publicly. And therefore, doing things as a human, especially when it comes to presenting, is what's always, at least right now in life, is going to be favorable. I don't see a day that'll come where everybody prefers that we just only do AI content and that's it. There's enough pushback in the community to have actual human voices. So I think while it's definitely not one of those roles that will like never ever be replaced, because I'll never speak in absolutes in that way, I will say this is a role where that human aspect is heavily needed. So it would be more challenging to be completely replaced by AI. And then last questions I have here from the 3 pillars. Can I give advice on how someone can start creating technical content if they don't feel like an expert yet? Absolutely. If you don't feel like an expert yet, and if you still feel like you're a beginner, create that beginner content. When I started doing Python content, keep in mind, I was creating it because I was learning it in that moment. I was not a Python expert at that point. When I was getting started, even with just using the command line, I was creating content on how to run the different commands, like what does ls do and what does pwd do? And I was doing content at that lowest level. No one says starting out that you have to create deeply technical content. You would be amazed by how many people come and look at the basic fundamental content that's out there when it comes to technical things, whether that's blogs or tutorials or videos. So there's value in doing that if you're not at that expert level yet. And eventually you'll grow and your content will evolve, or you just might just stick in the beginner content area, which is honestly where I like to stay, is in beginner content. So yeah.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
So, from the essential skills for success, what do you think is the common communication mistake technical professionals make?
Yes. So I would say, hmm,
Or if there is.
no, there definitely, I would say, in terms of mistake perspective, Knowing your audience is a common mistake when it comes to actually delivering information. And so it's a perfect example. My former manager, she did a Microsoft event where it was during that period where people were still trying to figure out like what AI is. And so we were used to doing content like that. So she prepared an entire talk around the basic fundamentals of generative AI. And while she's going through the presentation, she's realizing that people aren't really like into it. They're not really paying attention. And she stops and she realizes that this audience was beyond that part of generative AI. They actually wanted to talk about the technical things. And so she started taking some questions from folks and realized that the questions that she were receiving were a bit more technical in nature. Fortunately, she already had the knowledge that was necessary to have that technical conversation about AI. And so the slides went out the window at that point. And on the spot, she revamped everything on the fly to talk about AI and the topics that the audience wanted to hear. And so for something like that, I would say knowing who your audience is before you go and speak is helpful. You won't always have the luxury of knowing that, but usually if you're going to an event, the event organizers will be able to let you know the makeup of the audience. They'll be able to say, oh, these are mostly beginners, or these are folks who have a couple years doing whatever that topic is. So always ask in advance if you can, but if you don't have that information up front, be prepared more or less to go either direction, a bit more beginner level, or maybe you need to go a bit more technical. But that is one of the mistakes I would say I've seen, is not knowing who the audience is before you begin a talk.
So technically, it's basically the same thing as marketing.
Yes, yes, yes. Very, very important. And one thing I've come to learn being at Microsoft is that the number of individuals in our marketing teams that have the technical depth is definitely not very high, but you do have some who do have that technical know-how for sure. But from an advocacy perspective, knowing the audience is helpful, yes, but we should be able to fluctuate between going less technical and more technical. And it's usually that more technical where it creates a little bit more friction for someone in marketing, because being able to pivot something to be more deeply technical is actually when people like us come into the conversation and we can help influence whatever the messaging is.
All right, got it. Thank you for that. And maybe for a closing question,
Yeah.
uh, if someone in the audience is seriously considering developer advocacy,
Hmm.
what's one action they should take in the next 30 days?
In the next 30 days, what I would personally do is start looking at job boards, not to apply, but to look at the requirements of the developer advocacy roles for the current openings that are available on the market. The reason why I say that is everything I've shared with you today is the Microsoft perspective of how we do developer advocacy. But if you decide, I don't want to work at Microsoft, I want to go work at some other company instead, and they have developer advocacy roles open, they might do things a little different. They might have some overlap, but what they're looking for is probably going to be different on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why I say over the next 30 days, your first thing would be to go look at the job descriptions and requirements. And then from there, you can start building whatever skills that you may be lacking in, so that way you can strengthen them. So when you are at a point where you're ready to start applying, you will have had that opportunity to grow the skill. So that's what I recommend. Look what's out there. Don't apply yet, but look for just research purposes so you can tailor your growth accordingly.
Very well point right there. Actually, that was the answer that I was really, really looking for. It would be lovely for me to share it with the graduates that I'm handling right now, and the future graduates of the Tech Academy. It's one way to find out the niche the target market and at the same time your specific clients. So if you're
Yeah.
not just applying, you're really knowing your target itself.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. So I believe we guys, if you still have questions, don't hesitate. But if none, I would love to close and appreciate our speaker for today. And honestly, that concludes our Friday's Tech Talk. And everyone here, thank you for joining us for again this wonderful week. And a huge thank you to April. What a lovely speaker that we do have. And we'd love to have you back for another session in the future. Maybe
Oh, yeah.
let's go around with the technical stuff like you do on YouTube. I would
Yeah.
love to watch most of that.
Yes, thank you again for having me. I'll drop in the chat my LinkedIn just in case folks don't have it, and if anybody wants to connect on there. But yeah, feel free to send me messages on there. I'll get back to you. And I enjoyed being here with you all.
All right. And we hopefully get to see a lot more of the robot dog that you do have right there.
Yes, I named him Pixel, so you'll see Pixel in me in some content soon.
I'll be seeing. We'll be definitely seeing pixels soon. All right. So everyone right here, again, thank you so much. And be sure to keep a lookout for more tech talks this upcoming March. All event details are and will be posted on our meetup account. So don't forget to check it out and save your spot. Again, thank you, April, and to everyone here. See you guys next week, same time, same channel. Thank you so much. Bye bye. We appreciate you here. Happy weekend.